Why, hello there, old sports, and I wasn't planning on making a video like this, but then my brain decided I was going to, so here we are. Now, originally, this video was supposed to be about how the FNaF movies have very weird and confusing tonal issues, but eventually, as I thought about things that made these movies had weird tonal issues, one thing kept popping into my mind, and I figured I would make a standalone video about it. One of the main issues I had with the movie's tone was how the animatronics and the spirits inhabiting them act so inconsistently. Then whenever I bring up any issues I have with how the missing children or the animatronics in general are portrayed, people will usually say one line or one variation of this general idea, that being that they are just scared, innocent kids. And I think that idea is wrong for a few reasons, but it's not completely wrong, it has some truth there, I just don't think that's the whole story. I could also go into a whole rant about how media analysis kind of comes down to very black and white thinking nowadays, but that wouldn't be very helpful right now, so I'm just going to get to my first point. I don't want to keep bringing up the films too much because I feel like recently people are very defensive about their position on the film, so I don't want to cause a bunch of arguments, but then again, this video will probably cause arguments regardless, so maybe I should just say f we ball, but anyways. I've seen that a lot of people were upset with how Charlie was portrayed in the second FNaF movie, because she seemed a lot more aggressive than what people expected of her. But I think a lot of people forget that even back in FNaF 2, Charlie basically made a beeline straight for the office the second she woke up and was able to get out of her box. Now, I have seen some people say the counterpoint of, oh, well, the characters are just trying to go after any night guard because they didn't recognize William and they just knew he was a night guard, therefore they want to go kill the night guard. But in the games, Charlie knew William before she died. He didn't even kill her as a night guard, he was just in normal attire when he killed her. So if anything, considering she's supposed to be the one who's more aware than the others, if any of the spirits would recognize that this random night guard isn't the person who murdered them, it would be Charlie. And then also in the movie universe, she kind of just hates parents in general, and she almost seems to hate them more than William himself. But she's more than willing to just kill whoever she feels like she needs to, or with the case of Mr. Berg, just whoever pisses her off. And at least with Charlie, in the game, she has a very personal vendetta against William, at least compared to the other kids, and in the movie, she was alone by herself with only Michael to keep her company, and that definitely probably wasn't helping her. But then with the victims of the missing children's incident, they're shown both in the games universe and the movie universe that they'll kill anyone who gets in their way, intrudes on their space, just kind of generally pisses them off or wrongs them in any slight way. I think in the fandom there was this understanding for a while that the kids and the animatronics were only killing adults because they felt like they were trying to get revenge on their killer, but I feel like, as I said, as the series has gone on, I just don't feel like that's the case anymore. I feel like the most egregious example of this is in the week before. On night 3, if you go down a certain path, the route will end with the animatronics will escape the pizzeria, start kidnapping kids trying to find Ralph and his daughter, and eventually they will, and the book literally ends with Ralph trying to comfort his daughter as the animatronics are wreaking havoc on their house trying to get into their room. I guess my point here is that these kids are not innocent by any means. And I think it's unfortunate because you could tell a very interesting story about these innocent kids who didn't deserve any of this that happened to them, but slowly as they've been left alone over time, their anger consumes them and they become almost as evil as the person who took their lives from them in the first place. And again, I'm trying to share my thoughts and not sound like I'm blaming the kids for what happened to them, because obviously they don't deserve that. But I feel like also what they've turned into by the time we see them in the movies or the games is much different than the innocent kids they started out as. But I feel like the story flip-flops between showing them as these horrible monsters and innocent kids without exploring any of the nuance that would come with that. And I just think that's a shame. But regardless, that leads into my next point. I have always stood by the opinion that Five Nights at Freddy's has never really fully explored the tragedy that comprises its main plot. And again, I think that's a shame. Now, obviously, the most blatant example of tragedy in the series is that William Afton took the lives of these innocent kids away from them. But I feel like the other half of the tragedy of this series is the fact that in that process, he turned them into monsters. He turned them into something that is like a mockery of what they used to be. Not just as like mechanical creatures, but also in their morals. He took away any innocence they may have had and twisted them into monsters who will kill for him if he makes them. We see that in the movies, the spring Bonnie costume almost acts as like a layer of protection for William until their kids are actively reminded that he is the one who took their lives. And we also see that William has a habit of just bullying the animatronics into doing whatever he wants them to do. And honestly, I'm sure William is fine with cleaning up an extra body or two if that means the animatronics get to vent their anger on someone who isn't him. Again, beyond brief moments here or there, it seems like at this point, the kids have just been reduced into tools for William to do what he needs with them, whether that be continuing his experiments with Revenant and Agony, or if he needs to take care of something, he'll just sick the animatronics on them. This is probably a pretty common interpretation, but honestly I think the reason William even destroys the classic animatronics in the Follow Me minigames is because he no longer has any use for them in their current form, and thus either just wants them gone entirely, or needs to break them down to build them into something new. This is kind of funny and unfortunate to think about, but there's a good chance that the animatronics have killed more people than William has. Now, obviously, we only know about a handful of William's killings, and there's a good chance he was taking many more lives than the ones we know about, but that could also be said about the animatronics, because they're going through night guards faster than a pack of bubblegum. And again, I think that's part of the tragedy of this series, is that William took these once innocent kids and twisted them into something almost as monstrous as himself, though the animatronics can garner a lot more sympathy. In the end, these kids never had control over their own destiny, or their lives, or their afterlives even, all due to one man. But then again, you could argue that we all, in real life even, have no control over our destinies and we're just a product of all the random events that have happened in our lives, but that's a conversation for a different video. Now, one common retort I've seen to ideas similar to the ones I've shared in this video thus far are something along the lines of the kids aren't aware of what they're doing, the kids aren't lucid, the kids aren't, they're just not in their right mind. And I think this is where some of the writing issues baked into the series come back into play. Because we'll go back and forth from the kids just acting like kids to acting like deranged monsters, and then occasionally you'll get like a more gray, nuanced take where they'll be like, yeah, we want a new friend because we've been alone for years, stuck with like the same 4 people. And I wish we would have more of those gray moments, because what ends up happening is you see people latching onto those black or white scenes, and they'll be like, oh, well, the kids are completely innocent. Or they'll be like, oh, FNaF's should be violent, because look at all these things that the animatronics do to people. And I feel like that doesn't really get across the full picture. And then when these more gray scenes come along, they're so drowned out by everything else surrounding them that it's kind of hard to look at that as the full picture. Because something that I always think of is that it's confusing that the animatronics will kill random people just trying to do their jobs, and I've seen people say, oh, well, they're just angry against adults, but they seem fine talking to Mike or Vanessa to build a fort with Abby. So it feels inconsistent, but not in a way that makes sense, if that makes any sense. Sorry, I kind of went off script there at the end for a moment. I mean in the way that inconsistency can help a story if it makes sense that a character would make those inconsistent decisions. But the problem is, the writing is inconsistent in a way that is just confusing and unsatisfying. And I think part of this is that the missing kids are never really treated as their own individual characters, but only as a group, the missing children. And then the Golden Freddy kid is the one who speaks, just because they need someone to vocalize their thoughts as like a group. And I feel like that's kind of a dumb way of going about it, when all these kids probably have their own different thoughts and feelings on things. So why don't they get their own voices? Why is it only one kid who gets to talk for all of them? Again, lots of problems with FNaF kind of come down to the fact that lots of this stuff is being written as it goes along, and I think that's why the newest arc is actually doing the best story-wise, because it was actually somewhat planned. And I know that's kind of hard to say because Security Breach was kind of a shit show, but I feel like that kind of came down to Scott messing up communication between him and Steelwool, because I feel like Secret of the Mimic tells a good, interesting story. And it also shows, tying back into the main point of the video, it also shows that these kids can be somewhat reasonable, because when it comes to White Tiger, which is the only, like, actual spirit we see in Secret of the Mimic, He doesn't even really outright kill you, because while every other jump scare in that game goes out of its way to show how violently the mimic wants to rip you apart, I feel like the white tiger one almost looks like he's just curious and overwhelms you accidentally. Like the Foxy's a good guy theory, but if it wasn't completely stupid. So I guess the real villain of FNaF was messy writing. Wait, we already knew that. Now, originally I was just going to abruptly cut the video there, but then I realized I need to thank my channel members / Patreon people, so that wouldn't work, so sorry for the fake out ending there, I guess. But before I do that, I would just like to remind you all that these are just my silly little opinions, and I'm very open to hearing your thoughts down below, especially if I'm wrong. I'd like to hear you try to rebuke my points, and I will just try to engage with them in a respectful way. And hopefully we can all grow our understanding in the process. Up on screen are my current YouTube members at the time of editing this video, and I currently have no Patreon subscribers, so I'm not showing that because there's nothing to show. Thank you all for your continued support. I could not do this without all of you. Thank you. Well, with all that being said, and all my points poorly explained probably, I think this is a good place to end the video for realsies this time. So, if you like this video, please consider commenting, subscribing, hyping, all that jazz. Or not, I don't care. I'm not your dad. Regardless, I hope this video made your day a little bit better, and I hope you have a good rest of your day anyways, so, yeah. Good night, and see you on the flip side.